Hello and welcome to another episode of Just Two Dads. Although today there is just one. I am super excited about our guest today. Those of you that catch our episodes on a regular basis, may be tired of hearing that because I say that all the time. I'm so grateful for this platform and the opportunity to do what we do. But if you stick around, you will find out why I am exceptionally excited and grateful for today's guest as we venture again to another episode of Just Two. Welcome again to Just Two Dads. I am Sean Francis. As I mentioned at the intro, it is just one dad today. Brian Altunian and I started this podcast about 5 years ago. We were invited to be on a podcast that two dads had, and they never uploaded any of their episodes. And so we dared to think that somebody might like to hear what we had to say, or more importantly, create a platform that will allow other people to say what they have to say. And so we're so grateful for the opportunity. Thank you for tuning in, whether you're catching us on our YouTube channel or on various podcast platforms or on WSTX AM radio in the US Virgin Islands, where I am from. Either way, we thank you. I am exceptionally glad and excited about our guest today. I had the opportunity about 2 years ago to be a 2024 fellow with an organization called Caring Across Generations. I had not heard of the organization, and what blows me away as a caregiver and advocate is as much in the know as I think I am. I always find wonderful things in these wonderful people and causes that I get the chance to become associated with. And our guest today is the founder of Caring Across Generations, but she is so much more. She is an award-winning organizer, writer, and leading voice in the women's movement. She's a nationally recognized expert on caregiving and the future of work and what's at stake for women of color. That's exactly how caregiving is described. She's also the author of the celebrated book, The Age of Dignity, Preparing for the Elder Boom in a Changing America, and co-host of the podcast, Sunstorm, with Alicia Garza. And again, I'm just excited because I'm still wrapping my head around the idea that I myself am a caregiver. Welcome to Just Two Dads. I, Jen Poo.
Thank you for having me, Sean. I'm excited to talk to you.
Yeah, it is just a blessing. As I mentioned, we met as a result of my involvement in the fellowship program that Caring Across Generations offers. So let's start with, I guess, the organization or organizations, and talk a little bit about them, and then we can circle back to your story. And every hero has the first qualification, which is that they don't think they're a hero and they just do what they do. But you most definitely are a superhero. So we'll get back to your origin story and where your superpowers come from, so to speak. But let's start with the organizations that you have created and exactly what they do.
Sure. Well, nothing in my life has been a solo endeavor. So I'll start there and say that I first became an organizer or advocate when I was in my early 20s, and I was living in New York City, and I started organizing with domestic workers, people who work inside of our homes, providing caregiving and cleaning services in New York. And if you've ever been to New York or live in New York or know it, you know that it's an incredibly vibrant city with Wall Street and law firms and media companies and so much
Yes.
commerce. And it's kind of an economic epicenter, but underneath that is this whole brilliant army of women, mostly women of color, who care for the children and the aging parents and the disabled loved ones and the homes of the people who are operating all this activity in New York City. And those workers are so undervalued and often very isolated. And I just started talking to some of them in the parks and the playgrounds, the ones who are working as nannies with the kids running around the parks.
Mhm.
And And I just realized how important and essential that work is, and yet how invisible and
Mm-hmm.
underappreciated it is. And wow, I would hear these stories about abuse and exploitation and people not getting paid and people's passports getting taken and all kinds of things. And I just thought, how could it be that the people that we trust as professionals to take care of the most precious elements of our lives, our
Mm-hmm.
homes, our loved ones, our families, are some of the most underpaid and underappreciated workers in our entire economy. And
Mm-hmm.
without them, nothing else would really be possible. Like New York really couldn't function. Everything would kind of come to a halt if all the nannies decided to go on strike one day or all the
Right.
caregivers didn't show up for work. Anyway, so I learned a lot about that. But then we started organizing locally in New York, and we realized that there are workers all over this country that are not represented, who don't have a voice. And we formed the National Domestic Workers Alliance, about 50 of us co-founders, in the year 2007, to create
Wow.
a home and a voice for the workers who work in our homes. But, even as we were launching this national organization and building locally and trying to change the laws to protect the rights of these workers, we realized that this was actually one part of a much larger problem, which is that in
Right.
our country, we just don't really appreciate or support care in general, whether it's done by a professional or a family member, or right, we've kind of left it up to individuals to figure it out, and
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes it's too expensive or too hard to navigate, or right, we're just kind of, it's almost like the Wild West, this part of this of our economy that is about supporting caregiving is so difficult to navigate, and we're all
Mm-hmm.
kind of left on our own to figure it out. And most of us are really struggling to afford the care that we need and
Mm-hmm.
to manage it on top of our jobs and our work lives. And so that's when I started to think about caring across generations, and the idea that if we could just bring together all of the families who need care, all of the individuals, older people, people with disabilities who need supports, and all of the
Mm-hmm.
workers who provide care for a living into one
Right.
umbrella and with one vision and one voice to say, we should be a country that really values caregiving. If we value
Mm-hmm.
families, we should value care. And that is how Caring Across Generations started in 2011. And
Mm-hmm.
here we are almost 15 years later, and we've been through a pandemic, we've been through so much. But I have also learned that we do really care about care as individuals,
Mm-hmm.
and we need to help our country embody that in a whole new way.
Right. Right. That is so amazing. My son is 19. He was diagnosed with autism at the age of 3. We have a good friend, a friend of the show,
That's
by the name of,
early.
yeah, yeah. He was
Hmm.
diagnosed at the age of 3. We have a friend by the name of Greg Grunberg, who is an actor and activist. His son has epilepsy and was diagnosed. I think Jake was diagnosed around 3 as well.
Hmm.
And um, you know, Greg was on our show. He's been on our show several times, and we've been on his. So I said, my son is 19. My association with myself and my wife and I with the word caregiver,
Hmm.
that association is probably about 3 or 4 years old. And
Mm.
it's because Greg has a show called the Caregiver series. And I didn't realize that that's what we were, because when I hear caregiver, I'm thinking of someone who's helping an elderly person with a broken hip, uh,
Mm.
or something of that nature. Now, when I first mentioned this, I first mentioned it to Brian, my friend and co-host, and he said, well, I don't know if that's necessarily common. Then when I dug into it and found out that there's such a high percentage of caregivers who don't associate themselves with that term, it really struck a chord with me. And then the
Yes.
opportunity for the fellowship came about. I
Mm-hmm.
started, we started this men's group, a support group, for dads and or caregivers. And one of the prospective members, as I was having a conversation with him, he said, "Oh, I have a son with autism. Yeah, but I'm not a caregiver though." And when I told him what the purpose of the group was and what it meant, he was like, "Oh, I guess." And then the cultural aspect. Some of us were just,
Yes.
especially in communities of color, you're just like, I'm a parent. I'm a
Right.
dutiful son or daughter. I'm not a
Yes.
caregiver. That's not what I'm doing. So it makes it very easy to overlook the needs of that community if you don't even know that you're a member of that community. And then what I've always said to anyone within the sound of my voice who hears caregiver, autism, elderly, whatever have you, especially if you remove the elderly component and they
Mm-hmm.
just think it has nothing to do with them, they always need to be reminded that if you're blessed with a remotely long life, you're
Yes.
going to become a member of our community, whether it's
Yes.
your age, a diagnosis, an injury, whatever the case is going to be. So tell us this then. Tell us about little iGen, because one does not just grow up or come out of the womb saying, I'm going to change the world and start this organization. Tell us about who and where you come from physically, metaphorically, geographically, spiritually, because all those things play a role into the superpowers that you now possess that cause you to launch this amazing organization.
Well, before we go there, I want to just say
Mhm.
that I'm so glad you named this question of how, well, many of us don't even think of ourselves as caregivers. I mean, if caregiver is an identity, it is important that those of us
Mhm.
who are in this role identify with it, but most of us don't. And even my husband says to me, man, if I didn't know you, if I wasn't married to you, I don't know that I would know that I'm a caregiver. And he has been up to his eyeballs in caregiving,
Mhm.
um, with his mom, and I mean,
Yeah.
and both of us. So I think that this is a very real thing. And I just want to say for the record that this phrase that Rosalind Carter popularized. She says there's only four kinds of people in the world: people who are caregivers or will be, people who need care or will need care. And I think that that is so powerful, because the truth is that we have all needed care. I mean, from the time we're born to the time
Mhm.
we leave this earth, we do rely on others for our fundamental needs, especially once we're born. And then at different times in our lives, we will all come to need assistance, and we can't predict when that will be. And we also
Mhm.
can't predict who will be there for us when we need that care and assistance.
No.
And I just think that the we should be really embracing this expansive definition of caregiver. Like,
Mhm.
if you are managing the finances for a loved one, if you are scheduling doctor's appointments or shuttling a loved one to and from appointments, if you are a
Mhm.
parent,
Mhm.
if you are a sibling who
Yes.
um, does activities with a disabled sibling. I mean, these are all kinds of ways of being a caregiver, and there's no threshold. It's not like I have to
None.
do XYZ thing. It's like you are in it, and we embrace you, and you are a part of a tribe of good people who want to show up for the people that we love. And that is
Mhm.
a badge of honor to wear. Now, it's also hard, it comes with
Mhm.
responsibility, and there
Yes.
are lots of challenges associated. But I guess I just want to say, if you feel like, oh, I don't do that much care, so I'm not a
Mhm.
caregiver and I
Caregiver.
can't own that identity, I want to say to you, that's okay. You're still a part of us. You are a part of this tribe, this community, and we support you, and we know that whatever it is that you are doing, you're making a difference in someone else's life, and that comes
Yes.
with responsibility. And And we want you to know that you are not going to be alone within that. And that's really all it is.
That's so great that you say that, because there's two things that I thought of. I was thinking of a situation with someone I know that has a neighbor that is not the friendliest. The neighbor the person is a person of color and the neighbor is not, and there's a suspicion that the neighbor may even be racist. And
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking the idea and the notion of taking the higher ground and
Mm-hmm.
continuing to ask yourself, because I always talk about questions being more powerful than statements, and asking why that person is that way and giving them grace. That is a form of caregiving. And
Mm-hmm.
not only are you a caregiver for that person, you're also a caregiver for your own peace. And then the epiphany I was hit with, which for those of you that could see, if you're looking at this versus just listening, where I had my hand on my chest, was that what you just reminded me is that if you stop and think about the most basic human needs, and I always close the show with it, everyone needs to be seen, needs to be heard, needs to, know that they matter. Our friends, the truest friends, are in some way a caregiver as well. If you contribute, and maybe I'm going over the top with my epiphany and, stretching the definition too far, but if you add value to someone's life, it may be the smallest scale, but that's a form of caregiving. They say
Mm-hmm.
that the few people that have survived suicide attempts, especially those
Mm-hmm.
that consist of jumping off of a high bridge or building or something, that right after they jump, their thought is of regret. And then there are those who have said that somebody said hello to them and smiled and changed their mind about maybe jumping. That's a form of caregiving.
Mm-hmm.
So it may be a drop in the ocean as opposed to the wave that one gives when changing diapers or feeding someone or driving them someplace.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all caregiving, and we're all responsible for each other. So thank you for lighting that light for me.
Yeah, no, it's emotional. There's the emotional ways that you're contributing and connecting. There's material like bringing food or changing a diaper or whatever it may be. But then there's also
Mm-hmm.
the like practical, financial. There's so many ways that we contribute to and support basic needs that
Mm-hmm.
mm, that comprise a quality of life for another human being,
Yes.
that and an affirmation of life. It's affirmation of life, and it's quality of life, and it's recognition of another human being's presence in a way that is valuable, and it's
Yes.
essential. And
Yes.
that, all of that, big and small, is
Mm-hmm.
caregiving. And I just want to underscore how important it is to just to recognize all the different ways that people are caregivers.
Definitely. Definitely. So I just had another thought, which is, well, it's the same thought, but kind of, you just, I just love this energy because you're planting so many things in my head. So rather than to just jump into your origin and where your superpowers come from, you are a selfless person. So a selfless person probably is not usually crazy about talking about themselves or being put on a pedestal or whatever have you. So especially for those that are listening who may have a mission, a cause, or a contribution that they wish to make to society, but don't necessarily naturally see themselves as someone that is out front, think of that as you tell us about your origin and everything and everyone from which you come that has brought you here today and planted the seed to create this fantastic organization.
Okay. Well, I don't believe that anyone is selfless. I do, however, see myself as a vessel of a lot of people's aspirations, dreams, and
Mm-hmm.
investments. And one person that I think of in particular is my grandmother, who
Mm-hmm.
played a really big role in raising me from the time I was 6 months old. When my mom had me, she was a student. She was very young. She was new to this country. She was studying. She was working. She was really
Mhm.
learning. Like she was an immigrant from a whole other country, and she had me, and she couldn't afford childcare, and she was also on her own because my father lived in a different city. And so she
Mhm.
sent me to live with my grandparents until I was old enough for preschool. And I was so grateful because my bond with my grandparents, I mean, at the time, I don't remember because I was so young, but growing up,
Mhm.
I spent every summer of my childhood with my grandparents until they retired and then actually moved to the US to help take care of us. And my grandmother was insistent that we are not complainers, that
Mhm.
we
Where
are
did you where
problem
did you spend the
solvers
summers with them? What country?
in Taiwan.
Oh, okay, fantastic.
Yeah,
Okay. Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm.
And she used to say to me that if I can talk about a problem, then I can actually find a solution. And so
Mm.
she was really, she was adamant that there's no problem in the world that doesn't have a solution, and
Mhm.
that instead of taking our time admiring the problem and complaining, that we should actually be trying to solve it. And so I think
Mm.
that that's where some of my energy comes from, is like wanting to be my grandmother's granddaughter. And if I feel like something's wrong in the world, like do something about it and try to
Yeah.
change it. And she really believed that there's always a way forward, even in the darkest of times, and when it feels like there's no hope, that that it's our job to light the way, to
Mhm.
find a way forward. And
Yeah.
there always is one. She is that. I wouldn't call her an optimist. She is a very pragmatic person, or was
Mhm.
before she passed away at age
Mhm.
94.
Wow.
Um, she's very pragmatic, but very solutions oriented.
Wow. I There's so much value in everything you just said. Like I was talking about one's ability to think of a belief that they're willing to change or learn something. I don't know what was more valuable there. Everything that came after, or the fact that you hit me upside the head with the use of the word selfless, because that is so true. I've never thought of that before, that nobody really is altogether selfless, because even if you derive great joy from giving, that's the part that's it's okay if that
That's
little bit
very
is about is it
self-interested. Yeah,
yeah, that it is
yeah.
it's a misuse of the
That's not
word.
a bad thing, right?
No, it's not at all. It's
Self-interested
not at
is
all.
not necessarily bad. Mhm.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, so moving along. So you've got that example. You're, you're in high school. You hit puberty. You're growing up and everything. I want to know, especially from the idea of waking up one day and launching something, because it's one thing to do something that inspires people in your community, because you do change the world by first of all changing that which is within you and comes from
Mhm.
within you, your house, your city, your state, your country, and then to
Mhm.
eventually change the world. How did you go about launching Caring Across Generations? Tell us about the birth of that.
Mm. Well, my dear friend Sarita Gupta and I were both organizers. She was leading an organization called Jobs with Justice, where
Hmm.
they were really trying to solve the problem of how many jobs in the US aren't good jobs. They don't pay enough to pay the bills, they
Hmm.
don't have benefits, and one of the big categories of jobs that's like that is care jobs. I mean,
Hmm.
home care workers, for example, the median income of a home care worker in America today is less than $23,000 per year.
Wow.
And with everything, with the costs of everything going up, I mean, imagine trying to make the math from week to week doing that work. And it's really a calling for so many people. No one's in it for the money. People come to care work because it is a chance to contribute, and so many people see it as a true life calling to help other, especially older people and people with
Mm-hmm.
disabilities, live full lives even as they age and need more assistance. And um, so it is this call. So she was working on that, and I was working with her to try to think about how do we improve the jobs that specifically are focused on people who work in the home in the caregiving
Mm-hmm.
setting as domestic workers. And we started to really think about how this is part of a much bigger challenge. And one of the things we heard was how many families have loved ones who are diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and we're
Mm-hmm.
struggling to find the right care for that loved one. And then Sarita herself, her father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and
Mm-hmm.
she just started, her eyes were opened into the many challenges that dementia caregivers face, and how the whole family is affected, including her young daughter. You've heard the term sandwich generation. She was just
Yeah.
right in that sandwich. And she and I together just thought, wow, if we could actually bring together all of the dementia caregivers, the cancer caregivers, the veteran caregivers, the veterans, the people with disabilities, the older people, together with all of the workers who, as professionals, give care
Mm-hmm.
every day, we would have the largest coalition in the history of the country, an
Right.
unstoppable force for change. And so we just started to imagine, because and then we just started to talk to different organizations and really listen to the problems they were trying to solve. And they all were so connected to this root problem, which is that we
Mm-hmm.
just have not figured out how to value and support caregiving in our country. And
Mm-hmm.
we believed that if we came together, we could figure it out together. And it had never really happened before that this broad of a coalition would be
Mm-hmm.
attempted to be constructed. And so we took it as a challenge, and a lot of people told us it couldn't be done.
Really.
And when you tell two determined, optimistic organizers that something can't be done, you know they're going to try. And
Right.
so we did.
Right. And how long ago was that?
That was in 2000. We started to think about the idea of launching in 2010, and then we
Mm-hmm.
officially launched in July of 2011.
That's not a long time at all. Um, okay. Every time I have one thing I'm getting ready to ask you, you say something that has me go, "Oh, wait a minute! I got to get this morsel of information." So surfacing. So 2009. You said 2011.
Mhm.
Okay.
We launched in
Tell us.
2011.
All right. Considering that window is so much smaller than I realized, tell us as much as you can about what that time was like from concept to launching, because Caring Across is a nonprofit organization.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know kind of what the difference is, and this is a little more business minded, but I don't know, talk about a little bit of the difference between launching a for profit in a window like that versus a nonprofit, and what that time period was like for you guys.
Well, mostly that time period was about consulting with the key stakeholders that we wanted to bring together. We wanted
Mm-hmm.
to be sure that if we were going to launch, that it was something that, one, we weren't reinventing the wheel, that this
Right,
wasn't something that somebody else was already doing and we just didn't
right.
know about it, and that, two, people thought it was really of value, that it was a good idea that could really contribute to meaningful change. And um, and that we were the right people to do it. Like, we weren't sure if we were the right people to do it. I certainly, at the time, I knew nothing about Medicaid or Medicare or the ADA, or, I mean, there was just like, I had no literacy in so many aspects of the challenge of caregiving. And
Right.
and so we did a lot of listening. We gathered, we had multiple meetings with stakeholder organizations and really asked them, what they saw as gaps in the
Hmm.
ecosystem and what was needed from a broad coalition for care. And really, we listened for a year before we decided to bring everybody together in what was our
Hmm.
launch event. Was We called it a Care Congress, where we brought together
Mm.
over 700 people in
Wow.
Washington from
Hmm.
24 states. It was intergenerational, multiracial. We had family caregivers, we had professional care workers, we had older adults, people with disabilities, and all the organizations that represent the different constituencies were all there. And we had people from the grassroots who were really interested in organizing locally in their own communities. And we launched. The Secretary of Labor at the time was a woman named Hilda Solis, who was there. She came. We had some people from the White House. We had members of Congress. And then we mostly spent our time in groups around round tables, sharing our experiences, sharing our
Hmm.
perspectives, and talking about what it could look like to build coalitions like this in local communities around the country. And so
Right.
after we launched, we did 12 local care congresses like that one in DC in cities around
Hmm.
the country. And from there, it just kept building and growing.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, this is not a political show, and um, we believe that you rise above politics to talk about things that bring people together. But in doing so, there can be a very thin line between doing that and sticking one's head in the ground like an ostrich when there are changes that are too substantial that are taking place to ignore. When those
Right.
things take place, we go ahead and have those conversations. So you mentioned the White House a moment ago. And some people may tune out, some people may draw closer, but the changes that are being proposed by the current administration, whether they've taken place already, I've heard voices that say, well, let's worry about that when it actually begins to take place, because that really won't take place. That's not going to happen. And that's in some cases, people are just, for various reasons, not willing to talk about it. Either they're defending their own choice to vote, um, having voters remorse, or they just don't believe it's going to take place because they haven't been affected, nor do they think they will be. But I think at this point, there's been enough things that have taken place where we can't avoid that. Let's talk about some of those changes. I know you're well versed on them. Talk about some of these changes that are going to take place, the way they will affect everyone, especially our community, and what we can do about some of those changes coming about, to, what we can do about being the answer to some of the problems that those changes are going to cause.
Yeah. Well, a bill was passed, a big budget bill was passed in Congress and signed into law that is the biggest cut to the Medicaid program in the history of the program. For 60 years, Medicaid has provided health care to working Americans
Mm-hmm.
who have no other means to get health care. And it is a huge and really incredibly consequential program. It covers 40% of childbirths in our country. It is the single biggest payer of long-term care services in our
Hmm.
country. So it Medicaid pays for more than 69% of direct care worker wages in our country. Um,
Hmm.
and direct care workers include personal care aides, home care workers, direct support professionals for people with
Right.
disabilities, nursing home workers, CNAs. So it's really like this whole workforce of people who might be caring for your aging parent or your sibling who's ill, or right, that's Medicaid. And Medicaid disproportionately supports rural hospitals, rural healthcare clinics and infrastructure, nursing
Hmm.
homes in rural communities. So I think there's some communities that are going to be hit even harder than others because
Right.
of their dependence on Medicaid. So it's not, a lot of people think of it as like a poor people's program, but it's actually just a healthcare program that supports 80 million people in our country,
Right.
including.
Yes, people don't think of these care deserts, so to speak, that exist in rural communities. And I think that happens because there's also this idea that, you know, helping those that are less fortunate, um, uh, the nobility in that gets taken away because while there are people that do want to mooch off the system, you know, looking for a handout, whatever have you, I'm not even comfortable using those terms because I know that despite the fact that I know that there's people for whom that applies, as soon as you say that, people get a very clear picture of what that person looks like and how they dress, and they assume that that applies to everyone. So again, it doesn't affect them, so they're okay with having that removed. Do you
Well,
know the name of the bill? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
the thing about it that you should remember is that it is a program, the 80 million Americans
Hmm.
rely on Medicaid. And a lot of us don't know that we benefit from
Hmm.
Medicaid because in every state, Medicaid has a different name. So it's in Wisconsin, it's called Badger
Ah,
Care. In
Medi-Cal in California.
exactly Medi-Cal or IHSS in California.
Right.
Um,
Hmm.
in Connecticut, it's called Husky Care. Like there's a different name, but it's all the same federal program, which is Medicaid.
I don't
And
think
I
anybody thinks
guarantee
of
you, yeah, I guarantee you, even if you yourself don't rely on Medicaid, that you know and love someone who does. And the
that. Oh, yes.
evidence of fraud and abuse is so, so small. Like it's really overblown. Most people who are on Medicaid are working, and those who are not working because they can't work. They are either too disabled or are in a
Hmm.
full-time caregiving situation where they can't
Right.
actually leave the person in their care. And so there just is so little waste, fraud, and abuse. But that's been the story that we've been sold.
For
And
years
yeah, and
and
so I just want to
successfully.
say that I know it's not true. And I mean,
Well,
there is a little bit out there,
right.
but that's true with any system or program, that there's going to be a little bit around the edges. But most people who are on Medicaid are
Mhm.
working full time and struggling to pay the bills, and Medicaid is the only way that they can get access to health care. And then there's all these middle class people who cannot afford long-term care, nursing home care or home-based care, because it's so expensive. It's like 100K a year or 60K for home care. Like it's just not
Yes,
affordable for most Americans. And so the only option they have is to spend down so they can be eligible for Medicaid. And then
that is
Medicaid
so.
covers their long-term care.
And my work is in financial services. So talking about life insurance, retirement, short-term and long-term savings, and debt elimination, and then we work with attorneys to handle the estate planning portion of it and conservatorships. And so I know firsthand the value of a long-term care policy that, is, say, as a rider on a life insurance policy versus a standalone product, because you can't even begin to imagine how, expensive it is. And I'm a person that has never fully believed that all these people on these programs, and I say these people because those that are opposed to it and have no qualms about cutting it, think of it that way and have a very us versus them mentality.
Mm-hmm.
Even though that's not who I am, I realized for most of my life, I've been spoon fed the idea of people getting over, so to speak. And even though I don't believe
Mm-hmm.
it, when you just talked about the instances of fraud being low, it just really hit me, because even the concept of, what if it's not that many people? What if there aren't that many people that are actually trying to, quote unquote, get over or game the system? I think the idea that it's not that many, or that it is even a minority of any kind, is something that is never discussed.
Mm-hmm.
Never.
Right.
Never.
Right.
Almost never.
We've
Almost
we've
never.
been sold a story, and a lot of people have bought the story when it's simply not the truth. And
Yeah.
so anyway, I will say that that these cuts are going to be devastating. At least 14 million people are going to lose their care. And, in Illinois, the state where I live, for example, there's at least 1,000 families who have children with complex health issues, who
Right.
rely on very expensive medical devices just to live, to be able to sleep and breathe at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And those families are terrified because they cannot afford those devices. Medicaid helps them afford those devices. Their children's lives depend on Medicaid, and they are worried. They are scared to death, literally. Um,
There,
and and that's just the tip of the iceberg of who's going to be impacted by these cuts.
something, there was a conversation, someone I know had a conversation with their doctor the other day, and the relationship with the doctor is cordial, always pleasant, um, a little personal, but a little more professional, but
Mm-hmm.
great trust, and go back years. This doctor in this appointment got emotional and said there are a lot of children as a result of these cuts
Yep,
that are going to literally die.
that's right.
And that, to some people, just sounds like fear mongering.
It's
But if you're
not.
just talking about what you just stated, you're looking at facts. And then the other thing that you talked about, with nobody, which nobody ever says, is you talk about the people that are in the middle. There are those that are destitute and poor, and maybe in rural areas where there's these care deserts, and then there's those who can afford to pay for whatever they need. But most people don't even stop to think about those
Most
that
of
are
us
in the
are in the
middle.
middle. Most of
Yes,
us.
yes, yeah, that's
And we
most
will be
everyone.
affected too. We
Yeah.
will be affected too. And actually, a lot of us got access to healthcare because of tax credits that
Hmm.
helped us afford to buy our healthcare on the exchange through the Affordable Care Act. And at the end of this
Right.
year, so even before the
Mhm.
Medicaid cuts come online, which is the end of next year, this year, the bill is going to take away those tax credits. So a lot of people are going to see the cost of their health insurance on the exchange increase by like 75%, which is not
Wow.
affordable for most people. I mean, a 75% increase in your health insurance premiums is really crippling
It's
for a lot of
huge.
families. Yeah, that's
Yes.
going to happen to about we somewhere between 11 and 17 million people at the end of this year, like in a matter of months. When you see the cost of your health insurance bill go up, you should know that it happened because of the big so-called beautiful bill that Congress passed. It's not beautiful at all. It's pretty brutal. The big brutal bill.
Let me ask you this then. Uh, Two things.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is a little more hypothetical, which is and this may be devil's advocate for those that are listening than those that try to say, well, we have to cut someplace. Our debt is, our economy is where it is, and we have to cut back somehow. To those that, so the first question is to those that say that, if you were in charge, so to speak, do you have any idea what you would do instead of those cuts? That's the first question. And then the other one is more realistic, is what we can do as a society as a whole
Mm-hmm.
to fight and or prepare for these changes.
Mm-hmm. Well, the cuts were made in order to pay for tax cuts for the very wealthy.
Very
Um,
wealthy. Okay.
and and also to pay about $150 billion to increase funding for mass deportations and the ICE raids that you're seeing happening in cities around the country. $150 billion increase in the funding for these raids that are separating families, taking people from their communities, from their churches,
Profiling.
profiling, literally taking green card holders, citizens, and literally taking them with no due process from their communities, from their families, and in some cases, sending them to countries that they have never known or been to in their entire lives,
Which
with
makes no sense.
no day in court. And that is money that is being taken from our health care and our home care and our
Mm-hmm.
nursing homes. Hospitals will close, health clinics will close to pay for people to be literally abused by this ICE system and taken to countries. I mean, it's very expensive to send people far away. And
I may live to regret this, but if there's anybody out there who has anything factual, and I don't know that you would, because because I know how IGN does her work. But if there's anybody out there who has some kind of factual data that is contrary to that, I sure wouldn't mind hearing that. And I don't think that that's true because, again, it's not something that anybody talks about. You talk about what they're spending the money on. I was working out the other day, and that I was watching some sporting event. I think it was Sunday. The NFL was on, and there was a commercial for ICE and encouraging people to sign up,
to
and
deport
then
themselves.
not to deport themselves, but encouraging those to come forth and become ICE agents, and
Oh, to
and
sign up
and
for those jobs.
and
Yeah,
marketing the $50,000 bonus. Well, so where do you think that money is coming from? That's coming out of your pocket too. And if you
that's
have
taxpayer
little
dollars.
and if you have little due diligence that you're doing with regard to who Joe Blow is that decides, oh, I get to be a cop because I was not approved by, local law enforcement, or you're enticed by the $50,000 bonus. Who is it that is the ICE agent? And that
Right.
doesn't, and this isn't a pro or anti-Trump comment. That's just about what is it that makes sense. I don't.
Oh yeah. I'm
Okay,
just
yeah.
I'm just stating the even the cost of the commercial
It took the words right out of my mouth. I was thinking that, like, who pays for that
is
commercial? That's
the
the first thing
fact
I
is
thought.
it's our taxpayer dollars, and this bill in particular just kind of increases funding for that
Thanks.
work in exponentially, and then
And if
in
you could
expands
go ahead,
tax
sorry.
cuts for companies and for the very wealthy substantially. Like those are two very big substantive investments that this bill that took away funding from Medicaid. It's the same bill. It's a budget
Oh,
bill that basically
it's
takes
crazy.
from our health care and puts it there.
And what got me about that was that I was streaming the game, but it was still coming through from a major network. It didn't just pop up on social media. So somebody
Right,
literally paid for that ad, and the way it was written, the entire language and energy was just so inflammatory
right,
that I don't know, it had like a KKK type feel to it. I was just like, what on earth am I even looking at?
right. Exactly. And
So,
all I want is for our families to be able
hmm
to get access to the care that we need.
hmm
And um, we should, frankly, be expanding access to Medicare, to
rather than
Medicaid,
shrink it. Yes.
instead of gutting it, right? We should
Yeah.
be making it more accessible. I mean, there's 700,000 families. Most of these families are families like yours, Sean, of who have kids with developmental disabilities or other high need families,
hmm
and they have been on waiting lists for, in some cases, years to get access to home care services through the Medicaid program.
Yeah.
And so that's why Caring Across Generations has been pushing for the last few years to expand home and community-based services in the Medicaid
hmm
program and invest funding in it. And now we're doing the opposite. And that
Yeah.
is going to have huge implications.
And that's where I have to say to people that are listening, just from a humanity standpoint,
Right.
to
It is
listen to
it
these
is about
things.
humanity.
Yes, just to listen to these things and try to be open minded, because the high road can be a very difficult place to go when there's that much that is being threatened. And all I can say is just listen, and open your heart as well as your mind, and don't just stand on business, as they say in the streets. Just make sure you know what business you're standing on. That's the real thing. Make sure you know what business you're
That's
standing on.
that is exactly the thing. Make sure you know the business you're standing
Yeah.
on. That's right.
And
That's
with
exactly
that
right.
in mind, what can we do collectively?
Well, this is a moment to come together, and
Mhm.
we need each other now more than ever before. And if
Yes.
there is one story that we are divided, we hate each other, we resent each other, there's not enough, right? And we're being pitted against each other. There's another story, which is that we all have people that we love who we are
hmm
struggling to care for, and it's getting harder by the day. And if we
Yes.
come together, we can make a different set of choices as a country to support
Mhm.
families, to support care, support the things that we need to get. We're doing the very best we can,
hmm
and we just need the tools to be able to work, to succeed, right? And that's all we're saying is let's come together on the things that we agree on, which is the tools that families need in order to thrive. And and because we're doing our part and we're going to continue doing our part, we're
Yeah.
hardworking people, we
hmm
contribute in every way, and right now it's getting harder by the minute to
hmm
take care of the people we love. And if
Yes.
we come together, we have the power to change that. And don't let anybody tell you different.
There you go. There you go. Just I implore people to ask questions. Man, and speaking of which, this is the portion of the show where we state the following. Our ability to change the world. Um, sorry. This question, the statement in question that I'm about to ask, is just so different for me, given our conversation here today. And my gratitude for your time and your presence here today is just immeasurable. It went by fast, and I feel like it's just not enough time. So I'm hoping we can do
Mm-hmm.
this again sometime soon. But
Sure.
our ability to change the world is tied to our ability or our willingness to change ourselves. And I encourage everyone to ask themselves this question on a daily basis. With that said, Ajahn, if you can, give us just one example of a thought or a belief that you once believed strongly, but no longer believe to be true. And I can say that I try to evolve all the time. So mine already is the definition of the word selfless, thanks to you.
Great modeling, Sean. Well, I
Thank you.
was going to say what popped into my mind was I used to believe that the only kind of change that matters. Ooh,
Your video went there for a
uh-oh.
second.
Oh
I can
no.
still hear you though.
Okay. Sorry. The only kind of
That's
change that
okay.
matters is systems change or policy change, like the kind of change that really changes people's material conditions. And
Mhm.
now I believe that changing people at the heart level, really meeting people as human beings, human to human, and transforming and being transformed in relationship to other individual humans is just as
Mhm.
important as that systems change work.
Wow. I couldn't agree with that more. And I think that asking that question on a daily basis of ourselves so that we continue to evolve is the key to that even having a chance of taking place. Ajahn, I want to thank you so very much for your time here today. This has just been amazing. And I think that our audience is just going to get tremendous value, just as I did being here today. Thank you so much for being here. I think we may have lost you. But I want to thank you so much for being here, Ajahn. I want to thank um, Billy Footwear, who has been a great supporter of what we do. They are makers of adaptive footwear for everyone. The story of the founder, Billy Price, is one that is amazing. Once he became um, disabled, he was able to do many things for himself, not including putting on his own shoe. And so he was able to do that eventually. And he created a prototype, and a company was born from there. So just if you can, continue to ask yourself questions. Remember that questions are more powerful than statements. We need to be more childlike and less childish. The answers are there for us. Everybody needs to be seen. Everybody needs to be loved. Needs to know that they matter. And if you are a male or caregiver, a male caregiver or dad, and you feel like there's not any place where you might be supported or understood, I encourage you to join our group called The Den. The registration is free. That'll be in the show notes as well. And going back to Billy Footwear, if you click on the link in the show notes, you get a discount off your final price as well. I want to thank you so much to everyone within the sound of my voice, and we'll see you next time on Just Two Dads.